Hello, I'm very pleased to open IDFI online conference on international trends of artificial intelligence. You know, we have difficult circumstances in the country, but what can we do? Our conference is a very interesting conference. I believe has to take place, and I do thank all of you for joining us. There are quite many participants, quite many indeed. We are going to speak about international standards of use of intellectual artificial intelligence and also application of artificial intelligence in Georgian public sector, influence and protection of rights in the country. Therefore, today we will have a chance to speak to human rights defenders, civil society, representatives of public centers, as well as academia, local and international organizations, and we can have a very interesting discussion on the topic of artificial intelligence. And what is very interesting, we will have two researchers on international standards for artificial intelligence and another research of use of artificial intelligence in public service, legal framework and practice. The conference is conducted with the help, financial support of ECNL. We would like to extend our gratitude for supporting very important endeavor, and we are proud to be supported by you because this topic is very important for Georgia and new for Georgia. And throughout the project, your experience was important, and thank you for sharing your experience and helping us in the process of implementation of the project. So it was not only financial support, it was also intellectual support. We hope that we continue our cooperation in future because the topic, although in Georgia we do not have that many users of artificial intelligence, it's the matter of future and it's unavoidable. Its impact will take place on the development of the country sooner or later, and rather sooner than later. So it's time to start thinking about things that in future can place us in front of challenges. Today's conference consists of two parts. During the first panel, we are going to speak about key characteristics of artificial intelligence, international standards, and key challenges. It's important because in Georgia, we don't have good understanding at fundamental level. There are not many researches or surveys on this topic, and this is a very important component to understand as to what international standards and challenges exist in this regard. Afterwards, the next panel will be on Georgia, and different stakeholders will participate in discussion around the use of artificial intelligence in Georgia, practice, legislation, challenges, and prospects, which are also very important as a part of our discussion. We are very pleased that we have a very diverse audience. Thank you very much for your interest in this event, and your participation is very important in this discussion. And all participants will have a chance to send questions and to ask questions. And your activity is not only welcome, it's necessary to make today's meeting dynamic and vivid. We are meeting online, unfortunately, due to well-known COVID situation. Before we move forward to the main part of the conference, I would like to inform you about technical details and again ask you to be very active. I would ask you to introduce yourselves. it's important for the communication. Then you can use chat, and it will be very helpful for us to know as to who is interested in the topic, and in future to be able to send you additional information. And also for you, it will be important to know each other, so participants and interested stakeholders to know each other. So as we ask questions, please use a Q&A function. We have this function in Zoom. So send a question, and then moderator will read your question, and we will try to answer. The language is Georgian. However, there is English simultaneous interpretation available. To use interpretation, click the globe, choose the language. So English for English and German for Georgian. So now let us move on to our first panel, Artificial Intelligence, Key Characteristics, International Standards, Transparency and Challenges. We are pleased to have not only local experts but international experts as well. I believe, and I would like to thank them once again for their participation. This will make today's event much more interesting, and this information is very important as you will learn about international trends. And of course, I would like to present the panel members, our keynote speakers, Nada Goderzishvili, expert on cyber development. She is experienced expert on working on public issues. She's been working in public administration on the law related to public administration, international and e-businesses, good governance, e-governance, cybersecurity, and international security policy and cooperation. She is a well-known expert in Georgia in the field that is very relevant to our today's meeting. She was also an expert of our project. Also, I would like to introduce Vanya Shkoric, Program Director from ECNL. Vanya Shkoric has been supervising the global and EU implemented programs, and alongside other issues, she works on electronic and artificial intelligence topics, especially in view of human rights, which is very important for us. She has 19 years of experience in research. She is working on EU and UN level, on advocacy initiatives, on support initiatives. Also, together with EU member states, she has big experience of working on different regions, including Balkan, Eastern Partnership countries, Asia, and it's very interesting to hear from her experience. Thank you very much, Ms. Skoric, for participating in our conference today. And I would like to introduce Krzysztof Jeski, Policy Director from very well-known IPART Foundation NGO. Krzysztof is a lawyer, and lately, along other issues, he is working on algorithms. And 2 years ago, his organization has initiated a very interesting project to look at the use of algorithms by public administration in Georgia, and we are happy that he is with us here. And thank you very much for that. As we have already mentioned in the framework of our project, we have prepared 2 researches, one on artificial intelligence and international standards, and we can say that this will be one of the first policy documents prepared in Georgia. Well, maybe not the first, but one of the first, and it will be the source for people who are interested in those issues and who would like to work on those issues. And thank you to Nada Goderzishvili for working on this document. And now I would like to ask Nada to share key findings of the research. Nada, please, floor is yours. Thank you, Levan. Good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear friends. Thank you very much for an excellent opportunity. Thank you to Identify for giving me this opportunity. Working with you is always very interesting, personally and professionally. Now, about the research. In the framework of this research, my key task was to study the situation with regards to artificial intelligence in Georgia, but not only. And based on that, we have elaborated analytical document, research document, and the name of the document is Artificial Intelligence, International Standards, Ethical Norms, and accordingly recommendations and conclusions. So there are several important aspects, and I would like to share with you those aspects. First is introduction, and we are discussing the fourth industrial revolution challenges and technological support factors and participation-based technological solutions. Then we speak about the notion of artificial intelligence, and we have discussed that it starts, discussions start with the explanation as what is artificial intelligence, and we are discussing it. We are speaking about values, we are speaking about preconditions, facilitative framework, and in the end of the day, potential outcomes. And after introduction, we will discuss what is happening in public sector, how are those findings used, in which services, where and how. And then we have examples, European and not only European, where they have already implemented artificial intelligence and projects and programs in public administration. And it is very important to identify the role of public sector in implementation of those technologies. And one of the chapters is dedicated to the role as an implementer and as a supporter of the balance in those relations. So afterwards, we will speak about international regulations, and it will be a kind of an inventory of international legal, regulatory, and ethical and political norms. And we are discussing initiatives and activities of international organizations, but as well private decisions and initiatives of some specific countries, frameworks and legal frames. We will also discuss all those issues, but in this research we are going to speak about legal framework, but also about soft power, ethical norms, ethical standards that are also very important for international and other tools. In the framework of this research, we have also discussed the situation in Georgia and the status of Georgia and its international status as of a user of artificial intelligence and comparison of Georgia with other countries. And we have so-called Oxford Insight Index and position of Georgia. And finally, we will share recommendations and conclusions that we have to implement and I will just briefly introduce you to the key aspects of the research. It is done in two languages. So what has been the starting? I'm sorry, something is happening. I can't hear Mrs. Nada because there is background noise. Georgia is not spoiled, I'd say, with many researches and artificial intelligence. For discussions around artificial intelligence, it is necessary to learn more, and we hope that this research will be used by other researchers, by public servants, and by those who work in this sphere. And we hope that it will be a good base for starting the work for ethical implementation of artificial intelligence, and it's a good informational and analytical resource. We also hope that when we will work on policy analysis, we will use this research, and we are looking for a future future cooperation and in-depth discussion on artificial intelligence. And so this was an introduction from my side. Thank you very much, Nada. Thank you very much, Nada, for a very interesting presentation. I'm sure that the audience will have questions, and we will answer those questions in the question and answer mode. And you as a researcher, you of course have already shared this report, and the report will be available on our website. And we spoke a lot about ethical standards, so it's time to speak about the legal framework. And it will be very interesting to hear from Mrs. Vanya Skoric about international experience. So, Mrs. Vanya Skoric, please share with us what are the regulations globally and national regulations related to artificial intelligence. And for translation, those who need Georgian translation, you have to choose German channel. So, Mrs. Vanya Skoric, floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone at our workshop, conference, meeting, seminar. I would be delighted to be there in person because I have not been in Georgia for almost 15 years. So I'm looking forward to coming one day again, but this will do for now. And thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this really important debate. Your topic today is actually the hottest topic there is currently in our region, but also globally, because the questions of how to move from ethical to regulatory framework of artificial intelligence systems is being discussed currently at global level in several regional parallel processes, but also at the national levels as well in many, many countries in the world. So our starting point is that the enjoyment of rights and freedoms is, of course, increasingly expanding to digital space. and with the use of new technologies. So striking actually the right balance between technological development and human rights and freedoms is becoming an urgent matter. And the focus is on the artificial intelligence because of its rapid development and, of course, the significant impact it has on people's lives. So essentially, we need to find a way to ensure that the artificial intelligence systems are right-based, that they are consistent with international standards and the domestic norms, that they are fair, that they also do not unlawfully discriminate people, and they benefit essentially the public good. We also need to have confidence in the way they work, so to understand the impact of the AI and to be able to identify any harmful or socially unacceptable outcomes. So this shift from the ethic-based AI towards increasingly rights-based AI is good news. But the next step is how to actually ensure that existing or any new human rights and standards norms apply to the AI systems. So there is a significant gap currently in the debates about this rights-based AI systems and their practical application. And moreover, still a lot of AI developers and deployers, but also users, seem to be unaware of the potential or existing impact that AI has on rights and freedoms. So how to fill this gap? That's the main issue. The AI systems should, of course, be designed and developed to operate in a way that is compliant with human rights standards at every stage of either system design, development, assessment, auditing, and then, of course, deployment and implementation. So the key question actually becomes, how can the existing or any new human rights and freedoms norms and standards translate into AI systems? And this approach has to be holistic and it has to be coherent. And that means the necessity of a meaningful assessment of both the regulatory framework as a whole and engagement of different experts and stakeholders. And here stakeholders, when I say stakeholders, I mean the broadest range, including civil society, business sector, and the public at large, of course. So there should be opportunities to integrate a broader range of human rights, rule of law, and democracy impacts into the AI systems. And to do that, we need techniques of actually translating the existing or new norms and protection standards and safeguards into the actual design and the actual testing process for AI systems. So it's a combination of law and tech, basically, how to combine these two in a world where people with a legal background and people with a technical background rarely talk to each other and usually don't even understand the same lingo and the same jargon when they are talking about these issues. So such approach, or a joint engagement approach, should actually help companies who develop these systems to have a systematic and consistent rights-based approach and the way of controlling and minimizing any potential risks and harms. So that should allow the space for innovation, but also minimize and mitigate any potential risks. So let me tell you briefly about the ongoing discussions about these issues and AI regulatory frameworks in a nutshell on a couple of levels. So first level is the European level, the Council of Europe. The Council of Europe currently has two parallel processes during this year. One process is ongoing within the Committee of Experts on Freedom of Expression and Digital Technologies. And their objective is to prepare, by the end of this year, draft recommendations from the Council of Europe Committee of Ministers level on the impact of digital technology, specifically on the freedom of expression. And alongside that, they will prepare guidance on best practices with internet intermediaries and other stakeholders who are relevant for the debate for effective legal and procedural framework for regulatory mechanisms on the content moderation or moderation of illegal and harmful issues. So the second parallel process on the Council of Europe level is the CAHI, the Intergovernmental Ad Hoc Committee on Artificial Intelligence. And you've seen it mentioned in the report that my colleague mentioned before me as well. So this committee, CAHI, consists of all Council of Europe member states, but it also includes observer states. So it does have a global reach because US, Canada, Israel, Mexico, Japan, and a couple of other countries are having an observer status within this committee. International organizations, civil society organizations, my organization is an observer, so we participate in all the debates and all the drafting process. So the aim of this CAHI committee is to finish by the end of this year a feasibility study of the legal framework for development, design, and application of AI, with specific emphasis on Council of Europe standards on human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. So this will be essentially the first very comprehensive recommendation on how to do the legal and regulatory framework on AI, first one in the world of such scale and scope. And the key issues that currently are included in the draft of this feasibility study include the scope of regulatory framework, broadly speaking, the AI definition, which no one has yet managed to actually agree on, opportunities and risks from AI, particularly for human rights, rule of law, and democracy. So the impact assessment on these topics, the roles and responsibilities of member states, but also of business sector, of private actors in this whole framework. And the key values and principles that are included already in the study, and they should be included, as the study says, in any legal framework, include human dignity, human freedom and autonomy, non-discrimination, equality, fairness, and diversity, transparency and explainability of the AI systems, ensuring prevention of harm, data protection and privacy, accountability and responsibility for developing and deploying the AI systems, protecting democracy and rule of law, and liability issues for any damages. Now, the process is still ongoing. There are multiple subgroups and working groups drafting some of these key elements of the legal framework, but there is envisaged a multi-stakeholder consultation at global level, European level, and national level on this draft, on these particular elements that I just mentioned. So the consultation should start in March this year and run approximately until summer. So I do expect that Georgia will, as a Council of Europe member, conduct some national level consultation on this topic as well. So I really urge you and invite you to participate in that. And another process on the EU level, the regulatory efforts to regulate AI on the European Union level are also important because, again, all eyes globally are at Europe because the Europe tends to be a standard setter and rule setter for this entire industry and the scope of issues. So the objective is to actually create a regulatory framework that would, again, have a legal definition of AI, potentially amend existing legislation, adding some new requirements and safeguards, create a central authority for enforcement of some of the key requirements, and develop standards for testing of the impact. So for testing, for certification, for inspection of the AI systems, basically for the risk-based approach towards the AI systems. Now, the main issues in this consultation process that is still ongoing, and it is expected that the EU will roll out some regulatory framework in April, so less than 2 months from now. The main issues still remain how to actually design the risk levels for AI systems, how to devise those. So where to place some of the lines of the impact assessment on human rights and freedoms? And are there going to be some red lines in terms of banning certain technology that might be so harmful for human rights and more broadly freedoms that any mitigating measure might not be helping to reduce those risks? So these are some of the main contentious issues for the EU level. And as you can imagine, a lot of lobbying is happening on the EU level on this topic. On the UN level, the process is still lagging a little bit behind the European developments. Currently, they are trying to accelerate the implementation of last year's adoption of the UN roadmap for digital cooperation. They have established the UN Tech Envoy Office for a coordinated role of implementing the roadmap for digital cooperation. There are some movements already happening. We know that the Human Rights Council on the UN level is moving forward with its report recently published on the new and emerging technologies and impact on human rights. And there will be a specific resolution by the Human Rights Council in June this year on this very topic and on this very report. So it will very likely call on the UN to enhance its efforts in setting the standards for the AI and particularly the impact of AI and emerging technologies on human rights and freedoms. And then finally, just a quick mention of national level work. More than 50 countries in the world have adopted the national artificial intelligence strategies. These vary in structures, but overall, the strategy contains short, medium, and long-term approaches to AI and identifies specific areas of priority for each government. Now, when it comes to the development of these strategies, we actually believe that safeguards for human rights and freedoms need to be streamlined into the whole strategy, into the whole structure. And to achieve that, various stakeholders, including civil society, should be proactively involved in the design and development of national AI strategies. But let's stop here from me and let's continue discussion on engagement in the next round of our panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for very interesting presentation. I will switch again to Georgian for our Georgian audience.
Thank you very much for very interesting delivery. And yes, it's very important to hear from your experience for us, Georgians. Unfortunately, we are not EU member state, but there are many regulations and many standards that we are trying to adhere to and harmonize our legislation with EU legislation. For example, when it comes to protection of data, law on protection of data, or personal data and other laws, and including IA, the standards that now will be elaborated in the EU will be reflected on our reality as well. And accordingly, it's very important to think now as to what will be our preparedness. And today we have to prepare ourselves for tomorrow. So that these standards are reflected in our legislation, in our practice, and in our lives. When it comes to regional and international experience, Georgia can also focus at practical experience sharing with countries like Poland and Central European countries whose experience is interesting for us because at some level it's easier to share experience of new EU member states. And our next speaker has very interesting presentation for our conference participants because his organization looks into transparency of algorithms, analyzing different countries. And I think it's time to give the microphone to you, sir. Krzysztof Idzebski, sir, please.
Good morning, good afternoon. Hello, and again, the same as Vanya. I'm really miss Tbilisi. I mean, fortunately, I had a chance to be there. I think last time 2 or 3 years ago, but still, I would like to come back each year. Yeah, thank you also so much for bringing this topic, which is super important, as also the previous speakers noted. And I just want to take it from a bit different angle, because we are focusing, and this is the name of the conference, of course, that we are focusing on artificial intelligence. While, and this is also the part of the problem with defining what we want to regulate in this extent, that there are a bit simpler automated decision-making processes, or a bit simpler algorithms that are already being used by the public sector heavily in the region. So as you told, Levin, at the beginning of the conference, 2 years ago, we did the first research. Now we are conducting another, more focusing on part of the Western Balkans also. But also in this regard, the problem with the regulation is that it's more focused on artificial intelligence as such, which is important, but left behind the problem of other automated decision-making processes. So the usage of the computer software, of the algorithm, in the process of decision-making, so relations between the citizens and the governments. And there are a lot of them, also in Georgia, as we know from the report that was published in 2019, including, for example, the system of allocation of judges in this regard, which is really a popular example of an algorithm in the region. So we also could compare the level of transparency of that. And this is not as much complicated technology as the artificial intelligence, but it also can multiply the biases, the discrimination risks, and as in any other case, when it comes to the citizen-state relations, these technologies or these systems have to be transparent and accountable. So this is also our primary focus as a Państwo Foundation, that when we were working for many years also in the sphere of digital activity from the side of the government, but basically we were concentrated on transparency and accountability of decision makers, of public institutions. And the only change that we can see now is that technology is more and more popular in this regard. So also from the perspective of our advocacy work, while we are supporting the development of artificial intelligence strategies, and I will share some insight from a couple of strategies that we were looking in the context of transparency and accountability in a moment, we also have to bear in mind that we need to regulate, and it's maybe a matter of other discussion, whether it should be a regulation on the level of the binding legal act or the soft law, but I prefer the first one actually, because it is about regulating the rights and obligations of citizens in the end. So we have to remember that there is a broader problem of automated decision making, even with the usage of the simpler algorithms. So when it comes to the problem that we can see, and actually I'm looking with optimism into the future when it comes to the artificial intelligence, because as it was said a bit earlier, more and more countries, not only the countries, I'm taking the countries in Europe, especially in the region, not only the countries which are members of the European Union, has elaborated the AI development strategy or AI development policy. The names are a bit different, but this is about this is a document that tried to describe what kind of problems there are in place and what the future is when it comes to regulating them or trying to address these challenges. But so far, the truth is we don't have a regulation in the region, but in some countries we can expect it by the end of 23 or even earlier. Because still the problem that we can see, and it's unfortunately popular not only in the region, is like there are no legal frameworks that comprehensively describing the rights and obligation of the states and citizens in this regard. So in normal life, we try to use the existing laws on administrative procedure, for example, to understand why the decision was made by the algorithm, for example. Or we try to, and this is also our case, that we are developing a lot of strategic litigation, that we are using the freedom of information laws to get more information on how the automated decision-making processes are designed, how they work, what are the problems with them, etc. Unfortunately, this is not always possible. So, for example, this is the case in Poland, but also the problem in Hungary and other countries in the region, is that the public entities, the public institutions, as well as judges, they don't understand that also the term public information can refer to the information on how the automated decision-making works. In particular, as the example would be the access to the source code. So we're fighting with our Ministry of Justice for 3 years now to get the access to the source code of the system that allocates the judges. So maybe at some point when we're talking about the regulations, maybe some adjustments to the Freedom of Information Acts would be needed as well. So that's a huge problem with transparency that we can observe now in the moment in the whole region. The other problem, which is partially touched in some of the strategies, is there are no single institutions that oversight or even possesses comprehensive knowledge on which automated decision-making examples exist in the specific country. So it's sometimes because these are the innovative technologies, we can observe that there are specific public entities on the city level, on the central level, that are implementing this technological solution already. But for example, there's no one at the central government that knows about it even. So when the public officials don't know about such tools being implemented, it's also hard to provide a support, to provide support in the terms of even best practices, how to implement such tools to meet all the human rights standards or transparency standards. The other problem that we can see, and this is also a matter of the issue of trade secrets or commercial secrets, is that there are lack of external or independent audits are set in place in order to monitor the accuracy and fairness of algorithm operation. But as I told you before, I'm pretty optimistic when it comes to the works that are being done in the region on the level, still the policies, so the vague documents, but still they are promising quite a lot in the terms of very concrete activities. So I can share the link with you maybe a bit later. We did a very small research on the AI strategies in Czech Republic, Estonia, Lithuania, Russia, Slovakia, Serbia, and Romania. And what is optimistic again is that in each of the country, the principle, and I can just quote, for example, the Lithuanian strategy, which implemented the transparency as one of its core principles, and I'm quoting now, the principle to encourage transparency and fairness in AI applications. So I think this is something which is also unique about Europe in this regard, when we're talking also about the regulations, that the added value and the part of the what we call the European technological sovereignty is bringing the topic of transparency and accountability and the human rights approach or human-centric approach into this policy, as we don't see, for example, in China. Of course, with every strategy, we have to be very, very careful, because if you look into the text, one of the best strategies I can say is the Russian one, when also they talk about transparency, understood as explainability of the work of artificial intelligence and the proper process of achieving results, non-discriminatory access of users of products that are creating using artificial intelligence technologies to information about the algorithms of artificial intelligence used in these products. We will see how it will look in practice, but I think that the fact that we see such points, such principles in AI policy brings a lot of hope that they will be in line with the human-centric and human rights approach. So thank you very much for now. Don't want to extend my speech here, but just only thing, also remember about the simpler algorithms. They also have a big influence on our life.
Thank you, Christoph, for very interesting report. დიდი მადლობა. კიდევ ერთხელ ისევ ქართულად.
Thank you very much again. Thank you very much again. I would like to ask you, I would like to ask participants, there are 73 persons at the moment registered as participants of this conference, so please feel free to send us questions, and there are 2 questions by now, so we have time, we have enough time to discuss. But before we start answering your questions, I would like to thank our panel members for sharing very interesting thoughts. And unfortunately, in our country, at the level of the state, there are no standards regulating those algorithms. Even discussion is not there yet. We are at a very early stage. And Christoph mentioned our first research we've conducted in 2019 on a decision-making process and use of algorithms in decision-making process. And we have discovered that those issues are quite vague. For example, assignment and distribution of judges for new democracy like Georgia. Transparency of those algorithms is very important, while they are not transparent at all in this country today. So actually, there is this automated distribution of cases amongst judges, but are we really secure that there is no interference in the algorithm and there is no external manipulation with the algorithm? No one knows. So that's why for us it's very important to discuss those issues together, because we are speaking about use of AI, but at the same time we need to speak about transparency of algorithms, which is a big problem in our country today. And civil society is advocating for existence of monitoring and accountability systems. And now I would like to ask Mrs. Vanya Skoric again, from your experience, it will be interesting to hear how important participation is, participation of civil society in those processes, in policy development processes.
Thank you.
And is it necessary and is it important to ensure that civil society is participating? So please share your vision with us.
Thank you so much for this question. Well, yes, we would say actually at this point that engagement and participation, specifically in discussions and dialogues about these technologies, is a game changer for society. And in fact, people are actively seeking to understand the use of technology, especially the AI, and to advance their actions and engagements. There is I can share from our experience in participating in these processes and in also trying to encourage other colleagues from civil society, especially on the European level, to participate more. I can tell you that there is some kind of a fear from the civil society side, especially for those organizations that are not really considered to be working on tech issues, right? So my organization is also not working on tech issues, but we're working on civic freedoms issues. And if the tech is impacting civic freedoms and human rights, then we need to work on that as well. So we need not be afraid of participating in discussions that seem highly technical, whereas actually our participation is needed to ensure that the use of this technology is being done for the good of the society, for the benefit of those that we are representing as a voice, right? So in short, ensuring the meaningful participation, specifically of those who are affected, is a key condition for a rights-based development and deployment of any technology, and specifically the AI, right? So any of these meaningful participation consultation processes should include timely and prior awareness raising and publication of all relevant information that facilitates actually a proper understanding of its operations, functions, and potential impact. So for example, I'll give you my example. From my side, I may not need the source code because I'm not tech enough and versed to understand it. But I need a person who developed the source code to explain to me and answer my questions of the impact of that technology on the people that I'm concerned with, on the freedoms that I'm concerned with, right? So that's the whole point of the human rights impact assessment. These should include and enable people to access information and to better understand what is the project or product or service about, what are some of the envisaged impacts, what are the obligations and responsibilities of those who are developing it and deploying it to protect the rights and freedoms, and what are then the measures to reduce the harm, right? So, and finally, we as stakeholders, and especially civil society and those who might be very affected by the deployment of technology, should be informed about results of such impact assessments. And again, in a very accessible way, and then subsequently engaged in the evaluation process. I'll give you just a short example from national level. So participation in, for example, the drafting processes of AI national strategies is particularly crucial, as we heard that the content of such strategies usually includes some kind of references and impact on human rights and fundamental freedoms. So we actually, together with International Center for Not-for-Profit Law, explored some of the mechanisms and models for participation of stakeholders and engagement in these types of strategy developments. And in countries that we analyzed, we found that time and attentions were dedicated to establishing consultation between the institutions of the government and in between governmental bodies, which kind of led to a slightly inward-looking process, right? So there was a missing link with the public inclusion, and the level of engagement between government representatives, academia representatives, and business representatives during this process was in some cases very strong. So well-established engagement of academia and business in drafting these strategies. However, there was a lack of a proactive approach to include civil society, citizens' voices, and particularly those groups and voices of marginalized and vulnerable communities. So in order to facilitate more participation, the government should really invest more in the promotion of the AI literacy and awareness raising about the impacts of use and importance of use, and particularly for the public sector use, because this is where the AI and technology impacts our daily lives. And furthermore, when drafting these new AI strategies or any kind of document regarding new technologies that is strategic, its structure and the content should also include a specific reference and a specific section on how the participation of the public, of the stakeholders, of the rights holders, and marginalized groups should be ensured throughout the whole processes, and how it will be further developed and implemented. So these are some of the lessons learned I wanted to share with you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Vanya, for your answer. Დიდი მადლობა კიდევ ერთხელ. მე მქონდა რა თქმა უნდა კითხვები.
I had questions to our speakers, but there are so many questions from the audience that it's better to give floor to our guests, to our participants, and then if we still have time, I will participate too. So now let us have several interesting questions. So let us go through those interesting questions. One is about it's to Krzysztof, to our expert who spoke about his organization, and that you are working with the Ministry of Justice. Well, probably of your country, probably you meant Poland, to make it transparent and to open codes. And the question is, could you clarify, what do you mean when you say to open codes? Are we speaking about source code as such, classical source code as such, to open it, and the openness of code? You are speaking about the government's code, yes? What about standards of security, cyber security standards in this case, if the code is open? Because cybersecurity is a big challenge in today's world. And so from your experience, what would you like to share? And so this question was in Georgian, and I have translated it for you. So if you would like to answer, please.
Sure. Thank you for these questions. Yes. Actually, we are finding we're not working with the Ministry of Justice. We are working against the Ministry of Justice. We have a litigation against the minister on this. And yes, we want to get an access to the source code, maybe traditionally understood as you said. So the language and the description of how the program actually works, because now only based on the anecdotal knowledge, but we want to check it because we have this tech capacity and competences to understand the code, is to check whether the system that allocates the judges, it's fair, basically. And there are a lot of stories that we're hearing from different courts that it's not really fair in this regard. So the only possibility to check it's a matter of looking into the source code. When it comes to this question on the cybersecurity, it's I would say it's very similar to the transparency as such. When we talking about freedom of information laws and getting access to certain documents, not necessarily technologies, but certain documents, we have to balance between, different goods as personal data or privacy, state security, etc. There are some algorithms or some automated decision-making process that I can accept if it's like fairly balanced and ideally that it's imposed by the legal act that could not be as transparent as we wish to. So basically there is this principle of explainability. How does it work? But it doesn't maybe mean that the access to the source code could be given. In this case, we don't see any cybersecurity risk because this is the internal tool used by the ministry and the courts. So basically, the only risk, maybe this is some people are telling to us, but it's not really true because you don't have an access. It's not an internet-led tool that you can game the system. So basically, if you know the source code, then maybe you can trick the system and get the judge that you want. But now, I mean, this is purely hypothetical. The problem we have now is because the system is untransparent, we had quite a lot of evidence that actually it is being done, but by the government, not by the citizens itself. So this is also this principle of transparency is important in the terms of holding the government accountable in this regard. And each time, and we can't, I think, generalize, and this is important for any other human right, that we have to balance between this human right to freedom of information, the human right to information, and the security, the state security, or the some more information. Just finishing with this, just our new example of how non-transparent the algorithms are. We are now having a new litigation against the Central Anti-Corruption Bureau that also implemented the anti-fraud algorithm. So basically, to make it very simple, they are checking with the usage of algorithms, whether the companies that receive some sort of support because of the COVID-19, that they are spending it according to the laws, etc. So there's an algorithm that tried to detect some irregularities, some patterns, etc. We asked, like, who created the system, how much was it, whether there is a special procedure to check whether it's accurate and fair. And we got the response that this is a state secret because it will reveal even the information, how much was it, it will reveal the information on the technical capacity of this special service. And I think it's too much. I could understand maybe that the source code would not be given in this term because maybe you can game the system. But come on, you cannot just make a secret of any of this, because this is exactly how you would make a secret out of the procedure which is done by the Ministry of Finances or other public entities that are checking at taxpayers. I mean, you more or less, you know how they are checking us. I don't see any difference when it comes to the technology. Sorry, we should hold the same standards here.
Thank you, Krzysztof. Anyone would like to make a comment on this question? If you'd like, you are welcome. So most questions were about this code or algorithm or use of AI. Most questions are around transparency, whether this transparency of the code and transparency of the information creates security risks. Does it increase security risks? And can it cause or damage the whole matter of use of artificial intelligence in public sector. So if anyone would like to comment, you are welcome. As other participants are not willing to make comments, there is a next question connected to the definition in general and the difference in definitions. I think Nada will answer because she was working on it in her research. Very soon her research will be available, and she discusses differences between the definitions, but still we'll ask her to say a few words. Artificial intelligence, highly automated systems, can they be considered as artificial intelligence when they do the analysis and a person makes decision? So in this case, do we consider it as an artificial intelligence according to the definition that we have? Because the system helps people to make decisions. So is it considered as an artificial intelligence anyway? And because the decision is made by the man in the end of the day. Yes, Levan, this was one of the key issues for our discussion during our previous meetings, including work meetings, one we had on Monday. Participants always are confused when we write to them asking for public information. They are confused as to what artificial intelligence is. And we try to say, for example, if they have chancellery systems or HR systems in public administration, of course, this is just simple ICT solution. These systems do not represent IA, like MyGovG and others. They are not IA. Well, whatever we have in Georgia today. However, when we analyzed and when we researched the definitions of the Council of Europe, of CAHAI working group, the processes inside, we looked at OECD, ITU, UN, and those definitions, they are not homogeneous, but they have many things in common, more or less. And they state that although the system may be somehow dependent on human participation, but it works according to a certain algorithm, it is still IA. It's not like super IA that we may have tomorrow or the day after, but the systems that do make decisions instead of a human being, maybe the code written by a person, it is IA. So even semi-autonomous, it is considered as AI. So this is my observation, my understanding of the documents that I've read and researched so far for the purpose of my research. And when I publish my report on your website, you can read about it in more detail. So thank you, Nata. We have 5 more minutes and a lot of questions. I am very pleased. So there is a question to Nata. Any obligations of Georgia towards development of AI, and if there is any financing allocated for that? Well, development of technologies, of specific technologies, Georgia does not have direct obligations and can't have direct obligation because a technology is a mean, technology is a tool to facilitate technological, economic, or other development. So blockchain development can't be my obligation. My obligation can be to give better services to people, to develop and make public administration effective and efficient. This is our obligation, to be flexible, to be rational, and not waste the state money. So this is the obligation, yes, not only international obligation, but obligation towards your people. But when we speak about digital transformation, this is the necessity. And sooner we start doing it, sooner we start digitalization of the processes, the more and better results we will have. And one of the key recommendations, therefore, for the government of Georgia, based on this research, is not to stop and actually catch up with the progress we have in the world, and to do it not by developing a new bicycle, but actually using best practice and based on our local needs. Because when we look into strategies of different countries, all countries look for their own niche, where can they use artificial intelligence to make sure that the development of the sector gives them better and more results. So this is important. So where do we expect the biggest efficiency from IAG? Let's create a facilitative horizontal systems to make the process inclusive, balanced, and transparent. Thank you, Nata. Thank you, Krzysztof. Thank you, Vanya. We have to respect our agenda. There are more questions, but I'd like to say that we have also a second panel. And if you have questions, you will have another chance. No worries. I would like to thank our speakers now for very interesting delivery, for very interesting messages.